Good afternoon. My name is Mike Rosenberg. I'm a professor of business strategy at IESE Business School, and it's a pleasure to be here. It's 4 p.m. in the afternoon here in Central Europe. I'm actually near Barcelona. It's 10 a.m. in New York City, and it's 10 p.m. in Shanghai. Today we have a very special guest. We have Myra Yu. Myra is the managing director of Teladoc Health in China. She is also an IESE graduate from 1999, and she is also the president of IESE's Alumni Chapter in China. She's joining us live from her house in China. And by the way, I'm told if we do lose the connection for any reason, we will do our best to bring the connection right back. This broadcast, like all of our broadcasts, is being put out on LinkedIn Live. It's also on the YouTube channel. And La Vanguardia, the newspaper here in Barcelona, is also broadcasting this live. If you haven't listened to these sessions before, there is a chat feature on all three of those platforms. Feel free to type your questions into a chat. They will magically move to my iPad, and I'll be able to formulate them to Mrs. Wu. Myra, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mike, for inviting me.
So Myra, one of the reasons we asked you to come is because, here in the West, we're slowly starting to open up the world. And China's already kind of a few weeks ahead of us. You were ahead of us with the virus. China is ahead of us now as you come out. Can you describe kind of what the path was, how this thing erupted in, I guess, late December, January, and kind of fast forward us through the last few months?
Right. As you rightly put it, this thing just happened, right? We became aware of it out of nowhere. So I think the path was really, we started with a lot of fear because nobody understood what it was. And then all of a sudden there's a lockdown, there's travel restrictions. That I remember I was at that time outside China for Chinese New Year vacation. And all of a sudden I could not find any flight going back, right? So, and I had nothing but like 5 days clothing, summer clothing. I had nothing else with me. So there's a lot of fear, and then there's a lot of lost. So what to do next? I know there's a lot overwhelming media, so everybody then people start looking at these numbers. So the numbers grow. Like, okay, what does it mean? And like 1 month, 2 months down the road, then people got kind of a little anxious, right? So schools closed. So would it be open? Then there's economy, restaurants, everything closed. So what to do? Then I think in March, right, like 2 months down the road, then we start to see, okay, this virus is a little bit contained because everybody stayed at home really for about 2 months. People self-entertain themselves. And, it's amazing how people could adapt to the new situation. So we start into adapt and restart a new normal life right now. So this is kind of the emotional or whatever the realistic cycle that we've been through. Luckily or unluckily, we are a little bit ahead of everyone, and we're a little bit on the flip side of the curve right now.
Now, at a kind of human level, and we'll talk about both the business side and the human side, but just starting with the human level, I think if I understood you correctly, your son was actually abroad, and you still haven't gotten him home. Probably you have friends in the Wuhan region, which is a different part
Yes.
of China, because I think you're in Shanghai
Yes.
today.
Right.
How did people deal with that on a human level?
Well, there's definitely, again, it's a circle, it's a cycle, right? You started with disappointment and, with anxiety. So I still remember I needed to spend like hours or even days trying to find the right flight, right? I tell you, my son's story is even more dramatic because he was on the way to the airport, got checked in, and almost about to board the plane, where there's a new policy coming out of the country where, even if he boarded the plane toward London, the London airport would not allow him to fly back to China, essentially. So that was a new policy like every day. So I
And he's
literally had
16,
to,
and he's 16, so you're talking
yes,
to him on the cell phone while he's
yeah,
out in the world with all this craziness going
right.
on.
Yeah, I had to call him up and saying, come back home, right? The home meaning my sister's home in the UK. So you can imagine the lot of disappointment and then a little bit anger. So why, it's human nature, right? So you feel like, what have I done wrong? You've done nothing wrong, but things just happen. But eventually, I think he's done a fantastic job adapting to it. We find new funds, and we just kind of nurture the relationship virtually, right? We had daily calls, and then we sent email, we share jokes, and somehow
Yeah, yeah.
we're physically more apart, but we are virtually actually closer than ever.
And from a business in the business community, because you're part of an international company, you're part of the business environment in Shanghai. You're in the healthcare
Right.
field. What
Yes.
was the reaction of the if you like business community as this thing came in and as it came out again?
Right. I think it entirely depends on what type of business, right? So you could clearly see the airline business is hugely hit. And then the restaurants, entertainment, theaters, cinema, or film company. I got friends working in the film industry, so they've canceled all the film shooting for the entire year. So, and also if you look at the sports, right? No matches happening. So that's definitely hit. But then, if you look at our industry, healthcare has never been a center stage of the entire world than right now we're seeing right now. So healthcare industry, we have been pushing for virtualization, for transformation for years, and then people have been always a little bit skeptical, like, no, you could do virtual bank, you could do, internet email, virtual meetings, but virtual consultation, I don't think so. Here you
Now,
go, a
now, now,
pandemic,
Myra, if I understand it
fast
correctly, your
forwarded.
company
Yeah,
did 4
yeah,
million virtual consultations last year.
yeah,
This year,
yeah,
it must
yes.
be a completely different story.
Yes, yes. So this year, I don't really have the exact numbers, but we are definitely topping up the entire last year's consultation, the first half of this year. Given so from Asia's point of view, our call volume grew for multiple folds. So it's a lot of operational pressure, but the whole team came back to position because we already are used to the virtual working style, right? So
Right.
everyone came back on the second day of Chinese New Year, and we start offering services to our clients, to our members.
So, what does the new normal look like in business in Shanghai today? And I
Right.
understand you guys have the what do you call it? The Alipay um,
Well, it's a
health
QR
code.
code.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
QR
it's a
code, the
health
Alipay
code.
health code. Yeah.
Right.
What's
Yes, yeah.
and I think you actually showed me yours before. You're
Oh,
green.
yeah. I am green.
Good for you.
Luckily. Yeah,
Yes.
good for me. So I'm safe.
Now you could
Or
be
everybody
green,
around me
or
is
you,
safe.
or what other colors could you be?
Well, it could be orange or it could be red. Orange meaning you're exposed to someone infected, or it could be to someone suspicious, right? Red meaning you should be locked in.
And how does your phone know that?
Well, this big thing called technology. So your mobile phones, right? Movement is all this data. So we've always wondering, why do we need so much data? So at least for my observation, for once we leverage the data and science in a good way. So we could track and trace and protect people with technology.
So essentially, your phone knows where it's been, and it
Yeah,
knows it's been in someone else's phone, and that other person has been
yeah,
diagnosed with because they went to the
yeah,
hospital, they had the test,
right,
so they have SARS CoV-2 or COVID-19, whatever you want to call it. And since
right,
your phones were very close to each other at some point in time, then your code would turn orange, or
yeah,
whatever the right thing, depending upon
right.
how close the
Or
phones were.
you've been
And
to the higher risk regions, which is right. You've been traveling outside the town,
you've been to
or
Wuhan
being
at a
to
certain point in
Wuhan or
time,
some
or
other. Yeah, exactly.
right, or because it knows if you live in the same home as somebody else who does have the right. So
Yes,
so all of that is produced. And then are they actually checking the codes if you want to go to the mall or a restaurant
yes,
or a movie
right.
theater?
The movie theaters remain closed right now, but
Oh,
if you
okay.
want to go to a shopping mall or office building, so there are 3 steps before entering any important building. Number 1 is QR code. Number 2 is that check your temperature. Number 3 is masks, right? So masks in public places always on. Protect yourself and protect others. So
Everybody
once you
has a
pass
mask.
those 3, yes, then you come to the office. Then there's sanitizer, there's alcohol spray, right? So this is what I do for our office as well as home. So I sanitize the shoes, clothing before entering the house. I mean, it's my new normal.
It's true. What other aspects of the new normal do you see? Either from a
Right.
personal point of view or from a business point of view. Because I think
Yeah, this
I think the reason where everybody's interested is because that's where we're going to be tomorrow. I mean, here in Spain, we're in phase 0 in some parts of the country, and phase 1 in others, but eventually we'll be in phase 4 or phase 3, and I guess that's what Shanghai is today.
right, right. I mean, new normal, essentially we need to move everything forward with precautions. So that's the new normal, right? Business still ongoing and projects ongoing. We just need to find more creative ways to work together. So instead of traveling and having tea and lunch together every day, so we meet clients virtually, right? And then eventually people realize there are new ways to work and then to learn, right? Schools, so students have been on e-learning for months. So schools open this week or next week, depending on various provinces. But then there's postponement of exams, right? So the college entrance exam is postponed, but it's still ongoing. So I think what as a personal level, it's enormous. It's almost a surprise to see how much I can adapt, how much flexibility, agility that on a personal level. Same for the public, same for the business, right? So business agility, business sustainability, continuity is a critical versus previously probably people are looking at you need to grow bigger. Big is good, but big and sustainable is probably better.
And do you think some of these changes are permanent, or as soon as the emergency is over, we're going to go back to meeting our clients and taking them out for lunch, or do you think we're going to be zooming around forever and ever?
Well, I think things are going back, but never the same. I think people now, given the experience, things will be a little bit moderate than previously, right? So even if we still go out for dinner, probably not as frequently as before. And also during this lockdown period, people have enormous time spending time with each other within the family, probably never before, right? There's always, well, there's a news even in China, right? And right after the reopening or lifting of the lockdown, there's more couples filing for divorce.
Oh no!
I don't know whether it's a good thing or not, bad or a bad thing,
Oh
but
no!
essentially, people really need to dive into inward rather than we're always looking for bars or different entertainment style, right? So we need to get along with each other, right? They realize, and sometimes you just need to stay alone and get along with yourself. I mean, a lot of people need to stay home alone, right? The couple of days, the beginning of the couple of days, they could not stand it, but around 2 weeks, then people, I start to enjoy staying with myself, right? so
Right,
so
right.
we find new talents, we push new boundaries, and then we find new ways. So when you say, are we going back? Yes, we're going back, but not 100% because we have evolved.
And what changes do you see in the business climate? Do you think the business is going to be fundamentally different after all this? And then, of course,
Oh,
the
definitely.
economic outlook as you look around the world.
Well, every crisis marks a significant opportunity. That's my view, right? There's
And the
always
Chinese characters are similar, right? The Chinese characters for
yeah.
crisis and opportunity are similar, if I remember.
Yeah, I mean, the character had 2 characters for crisis. The first character means crisis. The second character of crisis means opportunity. So which means it's almost like a relative and yin and yang, right? So you have an opportunity, you have a crisis, you also have an opportunity. So the opportunity fundamentally is virtualization and digitalization. The transformation is definitely going to be accelerated, right? In healthcare, and you probably see this virtual meetings as part of people's life right now. And then you find virtual concert, virtual, not only virtual consultations and virtual matches, right? So people really, the virtualization will be accelerated. And I clearly believe that there's a huge economic transformation from a consumption driven economy to a more service and knowledge driven economy, right? So if you look at previously, right, so there's a lot of stimulus in terms of buy more, consume more, so that we could drive the economy. That has been very good in driving the economy, but at the price of sacrificing a lot of natural resources, right? So then we had all the other side effect of global warming, or the
Well,
deterioration of climate. But I think nowadays, when people value services more, I realize in a pandemic I can afford not to buy a new bag, but still surviving. But I cannot afford not to have, let's say, a virtual consultation with my doctor if I have a symptom. And I
right.
cannot afford to have my food delivered to my door if I'm on lockdown and
We
then
actually had a
quarantine at
session
home.
with some first-year MBA students yesterday, and one of the women was actually in the Punjab, and talking about the environment. She says from her village she can see the Himalayas for the first
Hmm.
time ever. She's in her late
Right,
20s, and she was never be able to
right.
see the mountains before because they were always
You see,
covered in haze. And the
right,
grandmother says that's what it looks that would and that's what it used to look like. And I guess all around the world, in the waters in Venice, here on the beach where I live, you're seeing the natural world just breathing a sigh of relief because all these humans
exactly.
have been stopped polluting for a month and a half or three.
Right.
Do you think there's any chance that we will embrace that paradigm? Will China embrace that paradigm?
Well, I think China, the government already set up a policy to, to work on a more sustainable economic growth model, right? So I think there was even a slogan then saying we would need to value more green mountains and clean air. So people already around the world, not only China, people realize a growth versus at the price of natural resources is definitely not sustainable. So around the world, people are working about innovations in clean energy, or in different, and reducing travel like we are right now. So we still communicate, but without having to take the plane and then waste a lot of energy. So I think people are getting more creative. And then the pandemic kind of accelerated a lot of the transformation. And then, to be quite honest, we need to rethink about value, right? Value, it used to be just numbers and getting higher. Yes, value, that's tangible value. But on the other hand, especially at ESA, we talk a lot about the social value, right? So what's valuable? I don't mean to downgrade certain professions, but at this point of time, people suddenly realize who could save us. It's the doctors, it's the medical professionals, and scientists, who are not necessarily, being, had the highest
Right,
paid
right,
jobs in the
right.
world.
And I mean, most people are looking to professionals and scientists. The president of the United States is not one of them, but that's we're not going to talk about politics on this broadcast.
Yeah.
What other issues do you see coming to the healthcare sector as a
Mhm.
focus of the pandemic? Is
Well, the
healthcare going to
health,
transform? I mean, I know
definitely.
I know you work for the telemedicine group, but
Definitely. We received more than ever, right? Hospitals' requests and demands to help us to build a virtual care program, because hospitals, they used to treat patients, and they are really good at the clinical practices, but to manage a platform of virtual care, it's probably not what they're good at. So, and also at the pandemic, there's a huge reduction in terms of outpatient visits, right? And also inpatient. There's a huge shift in paradigm. Then hospitals are looking at new ways of healthcare, and also enabled, empowered by new technologies nowadays. Because previously there's a lot of concern, oh, maybe the camera isn't clear enough, or maybe, we cannot detect the live vital sign data. Now with the wearable, with the camera, with the smart AI technology, you could get all the data you need remotely. So from a doctor's point of view, they could truly, treat, or not really treat, but at least consult a patient or diagnose with and empowered by the technology, which wasn't there before.
And you're seeing demand not only from people who want to use your services, but hospitals who want to have you
Hospitals,
come
they
in
need
and
to,
help them
yeah,
transform themselves. And then there's
yeah.
a question: is, are hospitals even safe? I mean, my neighbor tragically died, but he went in for a
Oh,
cancer treatment and ended up catching the virus and passed away.
yeah.
So the whole question of are hospitals safe places to go is kind of
Yes.
a deeper issue because why would you want to be born in a hospital if it's full of sick people? Go be born someplace where there aren't
Yeah.
any people who are sick. This kind of thing.
Yes. Yes, yes. So we've got solutions like robotic solutions for remote, like ward, visit, right? So you have one doctor, maybe have robotic going to the bed to bed, and in various locations, and getting the right data, and still, you could treat and prescribe, but that reduces a lot of risks for medical professionals. As you rightly pointed out, for example, if we don't go to the hospital, how could we do it and safely and at home or in some other safe place, but with the remote guidance from a professional? So all these are enabled and empowered by the new technology. That, I mean, I could not believe that these are some of these scenarios are exactly as what we saw 10 years ago in science fiction movies. It's now
Yeah.
reality
Are we
in
going to
many
get a
ways.
tricorder like they had in Star Trek? Where they, I actually saw someone's working on a prototype of a remote device that will just kind of measure your vital signs and.
Yeah, I mean, but I won't talk too much about it, but I've seen, right? So with the right device, doctors could detect your temperature and your some of the ultrasound dubbing with your body. So essentially, they are seeing through your body, but without harming your body. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
And
they can
temperature
put
was one
all
of
the
those
data
three.
together.
Temperature was
Yes.
one of the three things you said that any public place, they're going to look at your
Yes.
code. Do they use a
Yes.
gun to take your temperature or something like that?
Yeah, yeah, a gun and also just a camera, right? So those are thermal cameras. So in at the airport, so where there's tens and thousands of passengers, so it's very dynamic. If your temperature is up normal, it shows on the screen.
And then someone says, "Come over here," and then they'll give you another test, and they'll do more something else.
Yes,
Myra,
yes.
thank you so much. I think there's one more. I'd like to come back to you at the end with a question about lessons learned, but I have a whole
Mm.
bunch of questions from different people. Do you mind if we get into some of the questions?
Sure,
We've
sure.
got lots and lots of people online watching the broadcast on the three different platforms we're on. There's a few questions about the QR code, as you called it, which I think its official name is um, Alipay Health Code. The How do they know if your phone is on? I mean, how do they know? Is it obligatory to download the app, or you
No, it
just use
doesn't
it if you
have to
want
be
to?
Alipay. It doesn't have to be Alipay. This is a QR code. It could be acquired through Alipay or some other government apps, the public
Oh, okay.
service apps. Yeah, it doesn't have to tie into Alipay.
And you don't have to download it, but if you do want to get into the shopping center, you have to show it.
Yeah, I think people will feel safer if you show it.
Hmm. And if we think about this new normal, I don't know how much you know about our situation here in Spain. Do you think the government is going about it correctly, opening up the economy in kind of phases? I think the phase one, the restaurants are takeaway. In phase two, yes, they're open, but only every other table, and there's kind of this kind of steady thing. Does that seem like it makes sense to you? I don't know how deeply you know about it.
Well, again, I don't really, I'm not in a position to judge whether the government is doing right or wrong, but what I've seen in many places, not only in China and also, in some other places, the reopening definitely is in phases, right? So, and also in close monitoring with the data of infected cases. So here I could only talk about here. Yes, takeaway. I mean, thanks to I think this initiative, what we called Internet Life, since a couple of years ago. So takeaway is so convenient. Everybody's ordering food, and the food gets in your door by within half an hour. So and also there, you literally could order anything into your home. So thanks to all the logistic workers, that kind of is a bloodline for everyone. So yes, restaurants slowly open. The what I've seen here is also fewer tables, more takeaways. Yeah, I think every government is learning from each other. That's what I've seen. More or less. So there's a lot of experience that I see that country to country they are actually sharing.
Now, here's a question from one of our, and you don't have to answer this if you don't feel it's well enough briefed, but it's in Spain and Italy, the thing got out. In the United
Mhm.
States, the story is really really concerning. China managed to contain largely the emergency to the Wuhan and Hubei province. How
Mhm.
do you explain that? Because
Well,
if they've been learning from each other, we should have been able to do some of the same stuff, I guess.
again, every government's got their own, decisions and assessment, and then there are, I think, effectively, everyone is nobody knows how it would evolve, but I think the scientists and the doctors had a say finally, and saying, we need to lock down, um, based on a series of data, definitely. And I think at that time, well, some people say the Chinese New Year actually helped out, because Chinese New Year, everybody went home, right? So there's a week holiday, which then, because of the lockdown, people are not moving suddenly. So then they
Right.
stayed home and stayed right there. So in a way, that holiday got extended and then helped the containment. But again, then what I've seen here in China is the mobilization to the community level, right? So at the city level, essentially, right? So there's the business are recommended to operate virtually or remotely. At the community level, so there's a lot of community workers, and essentially to go, check temperatures and then issue whatever these sanitizers, right, to the house. And then they are actually cleaning all the elevators every 2 hours. Can you imagine? Right. So all these,
Wow.
and then spray all these, sanitizers to all the corners. So there's a lot of manpower required. But if this is a war, this is probably a world war that we all are fighting against an invisible enemy. So a top mobilization is definitely worth it.
And as people's, I'm reading questions here. Have their habits of just getting around, their personal transportation habits changed? Do people move around difficultly? I mean, the image people have, I think, stuck from another time and place is lots and lots of Chinese people on bicycles. My experience is lots of people on motorcycles and cars.
Yeah,
Has
yeah.
the traffic patterns of Shanghai and Beijing changed radically?
Right, it has evolved in the last 10, 15 years, right? Or 20 years. 20 years ago, you see a lot of bicycles, and then probably 10 years, a lot more what we called electric bikes. And then nowadays, you see a lot more cars. Especially, I've seen, pandemic actually. In the short term, the car sales kind of stopped, but now, it kind of came back because more people realize, I need a personal transportation. And also with the growth of the economy, the growth of personal income, I think cars are now, and cars and metros. So especially in a city like Shanghai, right? Metro, there are 17, 18 metro lines. You could essentially move to any corner of the city with metro.
But everybody's wearing a mask. Everybody's
Oh
careful.
yeah. Yes.
Here's
Yes.
a question about Brazil and Italy. So I'm not sure how much the this comes from one of our YouTube people. Um, if you look at Brazil and everybody's hugging each other and they're kissing each other all the time, uh, is that also part of Chinese culture? And does it work in
Yeah.
Chinese culture to keep people away, and it's not going to work in Latin cultures? Or do you have a view of that? Because you did spend 2 years in Barcelona during the MBA.
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely part of it is cultural, but again, if back forward 3 months ago, Chinese people, we are used to shaking hands as well, right? But we kind of avoid shaking hands, and then we kind of do this Chinese way of greeting,
You say
and
ni hao, right?
yeah, 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 exactly. But I again, I know, having lived in Barcelona, I love the Latin culture. It's very warm and then expressive. But I think it's, people just need to be a little bit disciplined at this special time. And it's probably worth the effort. It doesn't change who you are, right? It doesn't change your culture. It just at this particular time, it needs to be a little bit more disciplined.
Yeah, I'm reading questions and I'm trying to make sure they're not too political. Um,
No,
from a
I'm
worldwide
not,
point of view,
you know.
I know you're not
Yeah.
political, but from a worldwide point of
Yeah.
view, so there's different vaccines, different people are working on different types of testing. Um, where do you see that going? I read an article in the New York Times about Israeli technology, really, really cutting edge, things which can test the virus in acoustically and kind of crazy stuff. Where do you see
Right.
some of this stuff going?
I mean, another right pandemic. If there's anything good about it coming out of the pandemic, is the advancement of technology, right? And then I've seen multiple initiatives in the UK and the US or China. So literally, a lot of the countries, almost all the major countries, are actually working on a vaccine. So I think if I see it as a business, this is what we called a healthy competition, right? With that, then hopefully that we could have a vaccine probably within a year's time. That's a stretch, I know. Many are saying that's between 12 to 18 months, but with the maybe with the right technology, with the right competition, that we are expecting something sooner.
And the healthcare industry is a question from one of our viewers on YouTube. It
Mhm.
has been kind of going slow, let's say, in digitalization compared to other sectors of the economy. Is this going
Yes.
to be the sea change moment? Is this going to be the moment when the healthcare sector really takes a giant leap forward in terms of its own digitalization?
Well, I definitely see it that way, right? So if you look at 20 years ago, I
Which I guess
started
is why
my
you work at
career.
Teladoc. But anyway, that's
Yeah.
a different part of the story.
Yes, it's a side story, but 20 years ago, I remember I was working on consulting projects with telcos. At that time, we were all telling the telcos that voice was going to be free, and then some of the incumbents would refuse to believe us, right? So nowadays, voice is free. So around 10 years ago, if you look at the digitalization of banking, so at that time, banks are still saying, oh, there's huge security issues, it's money. And then people still would like a trusted relationship with the branch manager and blah, blah. So now banks are closing at least 30% to 50% of the branches, right? So who's going to the bank? It's all e-banking, the app. So finally, I think this digitalization, this transformation is coming to healthcare. Unfortunately, we need a pandemic to remind ourselves, how important the transformation would mean to people. But I clearly see the trend there where hospitals or patients or healthcare payers all see the value of digitalization.
Now, some months ago, I did a workshop for executives of a big bank here in Europe, looking for scenarios for the future, about 15 or 20 years ahead. And the executives agreed that probably they would need a quarter or a half of the number of people they had today, and probably they did not have most of those people in-house yet. Do you see the
Yes.
same kind of fundamental transformation going on in healthcare where we just need different types of people and probably less of them?
Well, I'm not sure whether less is the right word, but definitely there will be structural changes within the manpower of healthcare, right? So a lot of the heavy labor, heavy labor, work might need to be reshifted or reallocated to some other tasks. And also, given as I just said, the AI technology, the technology empowerment, essentially would make the whole healthcare process more transparent and more cost effective and faster. That could meet patients' needs, and the data is through algorithm is more structured. So the data would be more meaningful for the leaders to make a decision, right? So these are all, I would say, the huge advantage of the transformation in the healthcare industry.
I was doing a project not so long ago, and there was we went to an operating room where they were using 3D arthroscopic surgery, and one of the people on the team was the audio visual tech. There it was the video guy who's part of the medical team because he's got to make sure that the computers are working properly, and
Yes.
so there's a whole bunch of new roles which might be created in this transition, I
Yes.
guess.
Yes, I could tell you. So we are these scenarios are already true, right? So one of our group companies, right? So In Touch had this many years ago, right? They started this whole remote or digital operations, which allows the top expert to operate for a patient thousands of miles away.
You
That
better hope that the Wi-Fi
essentially.
doesn't drop in the middle of the operation. That would be bad.
Yeah, I don't think it actually,
That's a joke. I guess it's not a very funny joke, but anyway.
yeah, but I think that's another topic I think worth a separate session is that we rely more and more on technology, and then but there are people where maybe we should that's a over dependency, but I see it more positively because there are redundancy with there are ways to ensure that the network works better, right?
Of course,
So
of course.
so I'm not too concerned with that. And I'm sure with the professionals, the doctors and the scientists, they work together. And so far from what I've seen, things are working very well. And then we're protecting with these technologies, the medical professionals are well protected. And then
Sure,
more people could get access to the top experts via technology.
sure. What other changes besides kind of the state-of-the-art high-tech stuff in terms of human behavior in China? Do you see people consuming more digital content, becoming more digital in their day-to-day work and day-to-day
Oh,
lives?
definitely. Definitely. I mean, I think nowadays it's almost impossible to accomplish anything, right, without technology or without internet. Of course, sometimes you need to unplug. That's what I partially what I do. I retreat sometimes, just stay away from all these technologies and but to accomplish anything, right,
Do you
reaching
shut your
out to
phones off at
clients,
night, Myra?
I put my phones in a different room,
I once
not in my
interviewed Adriana
bedroom.
Huffington, and on her website, she actually sells a little bed for your phone where you can charge your
Yeah.
phone, and you have to kind of put your phone to bed. And she encourages people
Yes.
to sleep with a different room and get an alarm clock. And I know
Yes.
my own daughters in their 20s, they when they stopped using their phone for an alarm clock, put it away and got a proper alarm clock, they slept better,
Yes.
which I thought was
Absolutely.
interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I put my phone to bed every night before I go to bed.
Um, Now, what other changes do you see going on, which are going to stick with us for a while?
Well, I think there are people saying that, the world is going more divided. There are pessimists are saying, oh, the globalization is an end. But I have a slightly different view. I mean, the pandemic definitely is an eye-opening or historical experience proving that we're all connected, right? So our destiny is kind of interdependent, right? So if there's certain countries, the country cannot be fully reopened with other countries still in pandemic. So we're so much interdependent on each other more than ever. And second, we need to collaborate, like you said, vaccine, the R&D, the new medications. We need to collaborate more than ever, right? So if you look at all the articles published, right? So these articles are studied across different countries. It's not
Yeah,
like,
what
oh, this is a Chinese article, this is a US article.
what someone told me is that the science has been amazing, and the
Yes,
collaboration about scientists and how quickly they got the genetic code and how quickly that
yes,
was distributed. Now, there was an issue in supply chain in the first weeks of the crisis because most of the masks we use in the West and lots of our generic drugs are actually manufactured in China. So when China was
yes.
shut down, there was actually shortages of stuff. Do you see that changing over time? Do you think countries or companies will start to change their sourcing patterns, not to have things so dependent in one place?
Well, in the short term, because, well, to be quite honest, this also changes how business strategy or how business planning is structured, right? So we need to have more contingency plan. We need to have more crisis management embedded in our strategy. So this is not only the supply chain. We can't simplify it to, oh, we need to do everything on our own. We just need to plan it better. So I think in the short term, you see countries producing masks on their own, but in the longer term, I still see collaborations inevitable. All right. As soon as people figure out how to plan, how to manage the crisis, things will be better.
And from your experience and your viewpoint, what would you say are the lessons learned and kind of hopes that where do you see this all going? And maybe you can kind of distinguish between what you expect and what you hope for, which may or may not be the same thing.
Right, right, exactly. I mean, to be quite honest, I think everyone, maybe with the home bombardment of media, everyone was getting a little lost. And okay, so is this the end of? There are many articles talking about end of globalization. There'll be a lot more like protectionism. Yes, that's probably what we see for now. But again, I'm optimistic, right, by nature, but a reasonable optimistic with facts. So I do see, from a like physical level, you probably see a bit more siloed or separated, but on a knowledge, on a service flow, you see actually connected, right? I see that people are collaborating on the R&D, on science front, and then people actually think of, the interdependencies between countries, right? So nowadays I've seen that, a bunch of countries, they are actually classified. Okay, you are low risk, risk number one, two, three. Maybe all the low risk countries, we could have a bit more exchange of traffic and business activities now. So it's just smarter than before. And also from a business leadership point of view, it definitely transforms how we view leaderships. Right, we view leaderships of okay, how do we manage people, processes, strategy. But now, if your people are not around you, we're talking about virtual leadership. How do you lead a team or multiple teams? You don't see them, you don't talk to them, right? And then we used to see, okay, we could grow the business, bigger is better. Yes, bigger is better, but with sustainability, right? And we take care of stock shareholders value, yes, but we also need to take care of our stakeholders value, right? In the healthcare industry, it's patients, it's healthcare payers, it's health professionals, and also our employees. So these are need to be taken care of holistically. So that's what I see, business in terms of agility. innovation, and sustainability. Those are the three pillars, I think, going forward.
Fantastic. There's one last question, a little specific on the issue of vaccines and drugs, and I'm not sure if I understand the questioner well. They're suggesting that maybe things are going too slow. Now, I remember a press conference where President Trump was trying to tell people to get the vaccine out in a couple of weeks, and they were trying to explain to him, but Mr. President, we need to make up the molecule, then we need to test things, then we need to do trials, and it's going to take a while. And President Trump didn't want to hear that. This questioner is saying, if science is so good, how come they don't have a solution already? I don't know.
Well, that's why, we don't have so many scientists in the world, right? Only the top ones could be scientists because, especially, I could only, talk a little bit based on my experience, especially healthcare. Healthcare is a science and an art. It's not black and white, right? So the same symptom with their different medical history, our body organism are all built uniquely. So one medication works for you doesn't mean it works for me, right? So and then same symptom, but the root cause might be different. Your living environment might be different. Your diet might be different.
And you have to control against side effects and unwanted things, and
exactly,
and there's
exactly.
there's a lot of stuff that has to go into this to do it properly. I mean, that's what I
Right.
understand.
Yeah. So I would say, we probably could have something promising, but until you could prove it with enough data and tests, to scale that would be very risky.
Very, and perhaps irresponsible. Someone's
Yes.
right. As an entrepreneur, or the entrepreneur in you, besides telemedicine or teledoc, which is clearly what you're doing, what other things do you think might be interesting in a post-crisis world?
Well, I definitely see, following the whole virtualization, I see education, right? We already see education is completely
I've been
transformed
teaching
now.
online for 2 months.
Right. And especially kids nowadays with I maybe in 5 years or in just a couple of years or faster with the whole 3D, the technology, they will be able to see and experience virtually rather than looking at screen. I still think looking at screen is a very dumb and probably would be laughed at in about 10 years by our sons or our children, right? So all these, and also like let's say the operation, right, the surgery, virtual surgery would be completely 3D, immersed. So
Ready Player
you
One.
could,
Do you see the movie with the?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's not science fiction, right? So I would say, you remember the Star Trek, um there's like this beam of light and then there's a person right there, right?
Right.
And
Beam me
then
up, Scotty. Yeah,
you
yeah.
talk to that technology matured at least 10 years ago. I saw that technology already. It
Right.
wasn't it's just it wasn't
We
commercialized.
can't beam a person, but we can have a 3D image of the person talking to us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So we're talking about meetings with, like, Star Wars, like Yoda is sitting on that chair, all these other figures sitting in the boardroom, a virtual boardroom. So I think technology definitely is happening, and it's gonna move people, make people closer to each other.
Myra Yu, thank you so much for sharing your experience through this virus, through this crisis. You're in Shanghai. You're probably at least 3 or 4 months ahead of us, where many of us in the West are going. So we appreciate you taking time to talk to people from all over the world who are tuning into broadcast. Be sure if you're
All the
interested in our
best.
broadcasts. Thank you so much. Next week we have Professor Antonio Davila, who's going to be talking in Spanish on Tuesday. He's going to be talking about how to redesign your business for these current times. He's a very digital guy. And then on Thursday, we have the Chief Innovation Officer of Schneider Electric, actually from Hong Kong. Emmanuel Lagrig will be talking to us about how Schneider, which has operations all over the world, how they've seen the crisis and what they're doing to kind of restart the world and restart the company as we come out of this thing, at least for the time being. So thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Myra, and have a
Thank you.
wonderful evening, morning, or afternoon, wherever you are in the world.